We've had some time to process this year's budget, which was announced a little over a week ago. But as always, we like to catch up with Dr Lara Greaves, our political expert, to get her take on what was in the budget and what it means for us all. Dr Lara Greaves, no Ngāpuhi, an Associate Professor in Political Science with Te Herenga Waka Victoria University of Wellington, is with us now. Tēnā koe, Dr Greaves. Thanks for joining us.
Kia ora, no worries, anytime.
Now, we spoke to David Seymour just before the break and he mentioned that he thought that Tiriti or Waitangi was making people uncomfortable, and that's one of the reasons they want to leave Aotearoa. Do you think that's true?
Well, I haven't seen any evidence of that. I know that he mentioned that no one's really willing to admit it, but surely someone would admit it somewhere. Like, we haven't seen any evidence of this. About 1 in 10 New Zealanders say that they agree or strongly agree that the treaty should be removed from law. Maybe up to 15% or so, like when you do the math. So it's not a big group of people, but there's no evidence to suggest that any of them are leaving Aotearoa. And then I imagine that most of the public would go, oh, well, I'll go then. Yeah. You know, not just the Māori public, but most of the public would go, ka kite, like, yeah, like it doesn't seem to be anything that's particularly evidence-based. So, yeah, it would be really interested to see where he got that from.
And what do you think the departure is due to? Is it money, better living conditions? When people leave New Zealand, what do you think it's due to?
Well, whenever we see any survey data on people that have left New Zealand, it generally is due to the economic opportunities. There's, of course, the sort of classic big OE group as well that go off, and we've seen, I don't know, a lot of my cohort like toddle off to London and all that kind of thing. So I guess that's just what such people tend to do. And it's interesting because one of the kind of rhetoric that ACT has really picked up on is this idea that we're on the decline, that Aotearoa is on the decline, the make New Zealand great again type idea that actually we see around the world in different kind of what we call populist discourses. So ACT are kind of picking up on that, and I wonder to what extent, you know, they may genuinely believe it, but it does seem to also be like a political strategy. And some people do, yeah, agree with them on that.
Okay, now moving to the budget now, Māori Development Minister Willie Jackson said Labour's Māori caucus were all satisfied with the $825 million Māori budget, part of this year's budget. Were you expecting more funding for Māori-specific initiatives this year?
No, not really, because I think what Labour had done really well was kind of gotten through to the media that it would be like that bread and butter, pared back, kind of quite basic budget. And a lot of people were saying, well, that's not really what people tend to do in election years, that there needs to be some kind of bribe, although the extent to which there is one ever is kind of debatable. So I think a lot of people were expecting not much of anything. And I'd say a highlight for me is the Te Matatini funding. That was really unexpected, the $35 million or so in Te Matatini funding, when normally over that period they get about $6 million. So that was, yeah, kind of this unexpected thing in the budget for me and for Māori generally.
Now, we know that there are always backroom deals going on, particularly when it comes to the budget. Is it possible to think that the climate and Greens initiatives were designed to help bring the Greens and Te Pāti Māori on side, should they be required?
I think that people will kind of expect that or speculate that in some way. I think that generally the way to think about our politics under MMP is that you have these blocks. And we know that the left bloc is Labour, the Greens, and perhaps Te Pāti Māori, although they tend to be a little bit uncommitted. And then National and ACT on the right. So we kind of know that those blocks exist. Of course, we're all waiting to see if Winston Peters somehow in New Zealand First somehow come back, or someone else manages to somehow like Top or someone manages to get over the line. Probably unlikely. So fundamentally, we have to think of our politics as those different blocks. And at the moment, they're kind of going on about there being a coalition of cuts versus a coalition of chaos. So that's the way to think of it. And I guess that generally, though, when you look at the Labour Party and, you know, currently they're a majority, that's a lot of their views anyway. Like, a lot of Māori vote for Labour. Labour has got long-running relationships with Māori communities, good Māori representation. Labour tend to believe in green policy. So I guess it's a bit of both, really.
Dr Greaves, Meka Whaitiri said she was joining Te Pāti Māori because they don't censor the voice of wahine Māori. What's your view on how big a challenge this is, not just for women's voices in Parliament, but also wahine Māori?
Well, as you just said, though, like, Te Pāti Māori and Labour, they kind of, you know, like they have to kind of get on, like as we were just talking about, they just kind of need to get on. So it's really hard for Meka Whaitiri at this point because she's kind of having to tread this really difficult line of kind of really acknowledging why she left the Labour Party while still like not trampling the mana of her Labour colleagues like not wanting to diss them too much, but then also trying to stay in with them, knowing that like best case scenario, she ends up in government with them next round. So it's kind of tricky for her to try to tread that line. And I imagine that she's got her reasons and things happen behind closed doors. But at the moment, yeah, I think they're kind of doing a reasonable job. She's kind of doing a reasonable job of like not giving us the dirt, like not giving us the tea on like some specific incident of racism that happened or anything along those lines. So she's kind of trying to almost like make us fill in the gaps rather than doing it herself.
Dr Lara Greaves from Te Herenga Waka, Victoria University of Wellington. Thank you so much for joining us today and sharing some of your experts' insights. Ngā mihi.